So, what is like one of the first things you would want to do once things kind of go back to normal? And by that I mean normal as in like
normal
March.
normal.
Yeah. Like, what is one of the things you miss the most that you can't do now?
Honestly, I just want to like walk around a mall. That sounds like so
I mean,
little.
you can do that right now.
Yeah, technically we can walk around the mall, but actually no, I lied. The first thing that I want to do once all this bullshit goes away is delete Zoom off of my fucking laptop and have a party.
A non-Zoom party.
Yeah, a non-Zoom
an
party.
in-person party.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel you there. That's one of the first things I would want to do other than going to bars and bar hopping, because I miss that. Okay, but I want to do that. You know,
okay.
There's plenty of bars that I would like to go to in the city that...
If they don't close down before now.
Yeah, if they don't close down before now. But it's just kind of one of the things that you take for granted, you know?
Well, yeah, because it's like something that you can do. You don't even think about it. It's just like when you're bored, you want to do something like, oh, like let's go to dinner, or like let's go grab a drink,
let's go out for drinks.
Whatever. Now you really can't do that. I mean, I guess you can in a sense if there's like outdoor dining and whatnot, but it's not the same.
No, I miss that kind of intimacy. You know, when you're sitting at like a bar, you have the bartender, they're like
having conversations back and forth. Yeah,
I miss that. It's so awesome. It's partially one of the reasons why I've been stocking up on alcohol this entire time.
Facts.
Anywho, welcome to the War and Love podcast.
Welcome back, guys.
I am your host, Mike.
And I'm Ashley.
And today we're going to be reviewing 2 TV series that we watched. Because we had a little bit of time to watch a show. Or more like Ashley had a lot of time now to watch a show.
Yeah, I don't really have much to do nowadays until like the end of August.
Right. But before we get to that, we're going to touch on some stuff that we've been watching or whatever in the warm-up. Okay, so do you want to start? Do you have anything?
I mean, not really. I mean, I've kind of been watching the same things over the span of the few times that we have done our podcast. So I've kind of talked about all the ones. I'm still getting through Vampire Diaries. The Bold Type just came back on again, which I was surprised that it actually did. Continuing with World of Dance, and America's Got Talent is now like shifting. I finally realized how they're going to be doing it, because if you guys remember before, I talked about how they started filming America's Got Talent probably about like 2 weeks before the whole pandemic hit. And so the very first few episodes is of them actually with like a live studio audience. The people that are giving their talents are like all together in like this really small room, just basically the way that it normally is. And now the last episode that I just watched, they phased from the live studio audience to no audience whatsoever. So it was only the judges and the acts that were performing, and the performers were still around other people. And they kind of hinted at the fact that the following episode that's going to be airing kind of takes like another turn, and it's going to be like virtual. So it's going to kind of be how American Idol finished out their season, when everybody was like competing through Zoom and whatever it was, and just kind of like live streaming. So I'm interested to see how that's going to play out. But I don't know like if you feel the same way, but do you find yourself like when you're watching stuff nowadays and you're just like looking at different pictures and you just like catch yourself being like, well, they're not wearing like a mask or they're not social distancing or whatever it is. Like I just find myself like thinking about like, wow, this is so different than what it used to be.
You mean when I'm watching like a TV show?
Yeah, like a TV show and just in general, or like if anything along those lines, you're like, well, now I can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really watch too many live stuff, so I can't really, go off of that. Yeah, you're more
like a anime type of person or movie in general or anything like that. But
something
yeah,
scripted.
I guess that's true. But like anything that's like in person, like I catch myself be like, wow, this is like completely different. And it's interesting to see how like they're kind of like changing along with it. And like obviously now like we did have a handle on it. I'm not even gonna get into that. It's interesting to see how like now the TV shows that are like airing now are starting to become affected by it, even though obviously we're months and months from where we were. Right. But obviously because of production and having the episode released, it's been quite different.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much it for me. What about you?
Yeah, so I have two things I want to touch on. The first one I just want to kind of I'm not going to talk too much about. I've been rewatching The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya.
Which I've caught a few episodes here and there.
It's really weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Is that the one with the bunny outfit that you just had me watch the other night?
Yeah, so interesting fact that you probably wouldn't know, I don't know how many people listening would, is that when the series originally aired, they aired the episodes intentionally out of order. As in, like,
why the fuck would they do that?
I don't really remember the reason. So if you're watching it for like the first time, you're completely confused what the fuck's going on, because they would jump between, like, the first episode is technically I think like episode like 11 or something like that in season 1, and then they jump to like the first episode of season 1 and like the first couple. It's a weird order, so it's really strange.
So you're watching it on Netflix now, correct?
No, I bought the whole series.
Okay, so when you are watching it on the DVD or whatever, now obviously you have it downloaded into Plex. Did they like re-put it in? They did.
They put it in the original, in like they put it in the order.
In like the true order.
Yeah. But in Plex they have it in the aired order, as in like, so.
That's so annoying.
I had to, when I was uploading it to Plex, I had to rename the files to match that. So the second season, for the most part, follows like an actual order, like the standard order of the story. It's mostly the first season that's kind of out of order. But I don't know, I'm okay with it because I know what the heck's going on. I still think it's a good series. It's definitely weird, but it's really, I think it's still enjoyable to watch. I don't know how much you'd like it, but I will say that the movie that takes place after the series is really good. It's like considered one of the best anime movies. It's just really good, really well done, and you have an appreciation for it when you watch the series because it dives into the main character who's not Haruhi. It's somebody who she's with, who's in high school with her, who the whole setting, really the premise of the movie is what would happen if his life was like not what he's doing now, like if she wasn't in his life, if she was gone and he did not meet any of his friends, what would that be like? Because the whole premise of Haruhi Suzumiya is that she's essentially a god. I think I explained this to you. Yeah. And she doesn't know she's a god. Like, she has the ability to like affect the world around her, and there's people around her that she's essentially recruited without her knowing, that know that she's a god, and they're trying their best to kind of keep her occupied because they feel like if she gets too bored, she's going to just say, like, fuck this world. Yeah, fuck this world, and the whole world will get destroyed.
It's so interesting that you say that because, like, I remember you talking about this series, but obviously not in the context with you reminding me about the whole like god complex and whatnot. And just like me right now thinking about like the different scenes and stuff that I've seen, like I wouldn't picture that.
Yeah.
Because it's very like it's like a high school-esque type of like
it is funny. It's I mean, some people don't
like
consider
a day in the life of or something
yeah,
like that.
but there are episodes where it's just like shit goes to hell, and she doesn't know that she's causing it, but everybody else does. And so like the movie is essentially like, what if the main character Kyo, what if he doesn't his life, she's not his life.
Yeah.
What if his life is normal? Like he doesn't have to worry about this. And because you went through the first couple seasons, he initially is like, oh, okay, she's not. He's taken aback by the fact that she's not there, and he's kind of upset. But at the same time, part of him is like, you know, things are normal. Like he's trying to rationalize in his head.
He remembers her?
Yeah, he remembers. Nobody else does in the movie. He's the only one that remembers. Everyone else thinks he's crazy in the movie, and he's slowly coming to the realization that he actually misses her and that whole crazy life because it's an interesting movie. It's kind of tragic, but it's not tragic as in like it ends sadly. It's just it really goes into like his psyche and like how much this is really affecting him. The fact that nobody like even knows who she is, like, and everything like that. And he's trying to piece everything back together. It's pretty cool. And there are some tie-ins back to the series where you're just like, shit, I didn't notice that. And it like kind of has callbacks to things that they mention in the series, but you don't know what happened then, like what caused it. And this movie kind of explains those things. So it's great. It's a good series. I'm looking forward to finishing rewatching it. But other than that, most of my time has been spent playing AI, the Somnium Files,
your video
which I am just about done. Like before this started, this podcast, I am like just on the epilogue, just like at the end, everybody's dialogue and stuff like that. It's really good. I think I've mentioned to you before, I've played the other games made by these, you know, this team, this director, those being 999, Virtue's Last Reward, and Zero Time Dilemma, which are a trilogy called the Zero Escape Trilogy. And they're all like escape room games where you're stuck in a room. It's a bunch of shit that you need to figure out in order to get out of the room or you're going to die, you know? And there's a lot of weird shit in those games. This game is also weird, but not quite as weird. All of the games in this, this isn't in the same series, but all the games here made by these creators follow a similar logic wherein there's like multiple timelines. There's multiple endings, and you can jump around to different timelines to kind of piece together parts of the story that are missing. And there's parts of the timelines that might get locked out for you until you get information from another timeline to then go back and experience it. And it's really cool because there's just an overall mystery of the main character, who is Date, who is a inspector at a Tokyo police station, who is missing his one of his eyes, and he has no memory of his life from 6 years ago. And 6 years ago, there were a series of murders by somebody called the Cyclops Killer, who was never caught. And the killer would just steal someone's eye and murder them. They murdered 4 people before they disappeared. So a lot of the story, you're just like, wait, is he like tied into that somehow? Because nobody will tell him like who he actually is, or like, you know, what happened to him.
You also said that the people that they murdered were all females.
Yeah, there were 4 females that were killed, and he was a male. And the females all had their, I think, right eye taken, and he had his left eye taken. So that makes it another thing that was just like, okay, does he have something to do with that? So the setting of this game is like 6 years later. He's an inspector. He's what is called a sinker, where he basically is in a team, a special secret team, that when they capture criminals, they go inside their memories to find clues to prove that they are, you know, a criminal, that they committed crimes, because, you know, they sometimes can't get information out of them. So that's how most of the gameplay is. You will find criminals, you'll interrogate them, and then you'll go into their dreams and piece together clues to try and solve the mystery. And it's at those times that you're piecing these things together, depending on which options you choose, is where the timelines branch, and you can go off into different situations. So as I said, there's this whole mystery of who is Date, like what happened to him, because 6 years later there's a new Cyclops Killer who's murdering people and stealing their eyes. In this case, their left eyes. And as I said, I've gotten to the end now where I know what happened. So I'm going to spoil that now because you're never going to play this game.
No.
But people who are listening probably would want to play it. So go to the timestamp in the description if you don't want to hear. Okay. So what you find out is that Date, if you're wondering, was not the murderer.
I didn't think per se.
Per se. So when I say per se, throughout the game they kind of reveal that there was not one Cyclops killer, there were two. And one of them would do the actual killings and the other would remove someone's eyes. And
so he was the one that removed the eyes?
No. Hold on, I'm not done. So the actual killer is basically this politician's son who killed his first person at 12 years old. Like, he killed the politician's mistress. Because he's just, like, psychotic, the kid. Like, he just ran up and just, like, stabbed her in the back. And then, like, they, like, buried her to hide her corpse and shit like that. It's really fucked up. And so that kid is essentially the Cyclops killer. And the mob boss who helped, like, bury the woman, like, back then, is the one ripping out the eyes. That was what happened a few years ago. So now you're like, okay, what is that? Why did I say not quite? So what they end up revealing is, I told you that the sync machine is how they go into people's memories.
Yeah.
And throughout the game, they have, like, a hard rule where they say you cannot sync for more than 6 minutes. And they don't really tell you why. Like, they're just like, it's going to cause problems if you do that. But what they don't tell you is that's not quite true. What it does is if you sync after more than 6 minutes, it swaps people's bodies. So their minds end up swapping. So hold on. It gets more crazy. So what is revealed is that Date is not actually, his body is not his. His body is the serial killer's body. And he swapped with that person. And there's basically a bunch of body swaps. Like, Date was actually a hitman, like, back in the day, who wanted to get out of the business, and his boss was essentially the mafia boss, that same mob boss. And that same mob boss told him that he could get out if he did one last job, and the one last job being murdering this woman and her daughter. The reason he wanted them murdered is because the daughter was the child of the politician's mistress.
Oh.
And the thing is that woman and his daughter was the reason he wanted to get out in the first place, was for them, because he was in love with them. So it's a whole fucking thing. So he decides to, like, he does, like, a plan to get out, to get around having to kill them. And the woman ends up getting shot anyway, like the mom. She's not killed, she's injured. But there's, like, this whole series of events that ends up causing Date's body to be switched with the serial killer. And the result of it is it's like kind of an incomplete transfer, where they do transfer bodies, but they end up both having amnesia, where they forget, like, who each other is. Which is what kind of leads up into the game, like, 6 years later. I'm missing a lot of context here because this is a really complicated game, but it was getting crazy at this point because there's, like, scenes in the game where you're, like, going into one of the girls, like the girl from the mom, her memories, and you're seeing scenes of, like, her remembering, like, all those murders back 6 years ago.
I remember you telling me.
And you're like, why does she know this? Was she there? What's revealed is, no, you didn't actually go into that girl's memories. You went into the serial killer's memories, because that serial killer is still alive, and he's been jumping between people's bodies. And at the time when you synced into hers, that was the serial killer's memories that you were looking into.
So the serial killer was in the little girl?
Yeah, at that time. He's been syncing between different people's bodies because he's trying to get back to his own body, your body, Date's body, because he wants to get revenge for you stealing his body in the first place. Because after 6 years, he pieced together his memories and remembered who he actually is.
So when you sync into somebody else's body, or sync into somebody else's, I guess, memories or whatnot, do you choose to sync into
so there's like
person?
there's like a machine that they have built where, like, you you both sit into like chairs that are kind of like this. There's a device that goes on your head, and there's like signals that go into your eyes that then make you start.
But obviously, both parties have to be willing to.
Well, I wouldn't say both have to be willing.
Okay.
One of them has to be willing. The person actually trying to do the sync has to be willing. Generally speaking, they usually put the other person to sleep because they're not very cooperative. So yeah, like, and as I said, like there is that 6-minute time limit where that's meant for just syncing. If you go beyond that, that's where like it can swap people's bodies.
So does he get back to his?
He eventually
own
gets
body?
back to his own body, and because like the serial killer basically kidnaps him and swaps bodies back with him because he wants to murder the woman and her daughter in front of him for revenge. And you kind of have this whole thing where you're trying to stop it from happening, which at the end it finally does, and you manage to kill him and save them. And then basically everyone's just like, wow, you're back? We haven't seen you in like 6 fucking years. We thought you were like dead or something. So that's the epilogue I'm at right now, where like the girl who kind of thought of you like as his father is like, you're back, and like, are you and mom gonna get back together or whatever, so.
So, but the time that the serial killer was in his body,
where was he?
Was
he was in jail.
Low or something?
He was in jail.
Oh.
They put him in jail for because he was an assassin, and they like basically they captured him, and they just put him in jail, and he's been sitting in jail for 6 years. So it was crazy. It was a really crazy game, but I enjoyed it. I know you're looking at me like, the fuck is going on here? It's really confusing if you don't play the game. It's not too long. It's like 22 hours, which for a video game that I'm used to, it's usually going to be around like 30 to 40 at least, if not longer. So that's AI Somnium Files. If
you're just joining us back.
So bullet points, play this game. If you played the other 3, you're going to really like it. In terms of where I rank it so far, well, my favorite one out of the trilogy was Virtue's Last Reward. So I would say this is probably around the same place as Virtue's Last Reward. It's really good. I highly recommend it. And that's all I have to talk about right now. So let's go right into the main event. Okay, so it's my turn to go first. So what did you give me?
I gave you Stranger Things, and I'm really interested to see what you have to say about this.
Yeah. A lot of you might be surprised that I haven't seen this.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I haven't is because when this first aired, pretty much everybody who was trying to sell it to me was using like, hey, this is like a really cool like 80s-esque style like thing, and I was like, I don't fucking care. And they'd be like, no, but what you don't understand is it's got such a great 80s aesthetic. And I was like, what part of I don't give a fuck about the 80s don't you get? The problem is that nobody was able to sell me on this in the way that I would have been interested. I don't give a shit that it's in the 80s, okay? And to be honest, I don't really like the 80s. So anybody trying to sell me on something that's set in the 80s, don't start with it's set in the 80s and try and lean into the 80s thing.
That is really any type of video or movie or anything like that. Because like even if you say it has like a 90s-esque vibe, you're just like, it's overplayed.
I'm going to get annoyed.
Like as soon as they do more than one thing, you're like, it's dumb.
Yeah.
I'm like,
because in my opinion, this isn't an overplayed 80s series.
No, it's
just set in the 80s. But what I would use as an example of something that's overplayed is like Captain Marvel. There were way too many.
There was not.
There was way too many 90s references there.
There was like 3.
There was like 4. I enjoyed some of the references in that movie, but when it got to the Fresh Prince thing, I rolled my fucking eyes. I was like, oh my god, I get it. We're in the 90s.
I digress. So
okay,
moving on.
So Stranger Things. So I don't know who doesn't know about this series. It's on Netflix. First season aired in 2016. As I said, the first season is set in I think October of 1983, and it's set in a town in I had it. I think it's Indiana.
I don't fucking remember.
I feel like it's Indiana. It's Indiana. Yeah, Hawkins, Indiana.
Oh yeah.
And it kind of involves it involves this character who ends up disappearing within a group of friends, and the whole season basically is exploring what happened to him and all the weird shit going on as a result of that. So that's the quick bullet notes of what the season is. There's a lot more into there.
I also think a lot of our listeners probably have either A, heard about it to some extent, or B, have at least watched a few episodes to know.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into as much detail in the story just because if you have, I don't want to bore you, but I am going to go into like my thoughts on it, because I'm going to kind of dig into it a little bit and then explore like what I thought about it. So, you know, the first thing I noticed, you know, the series opens up, there's this like scientist essentially running from a lab because he's being chased, and he goes in like the elevator to try and escape, and then this creature kills him. So cool start. And then it kind of goes shoots to these kids playing Dungeons and Dragons, these 4 kids who are 4 of the main characters. So there's Will, Dustin, Mike, and Lucas. What, you're like looking at, okay. And yeah, they're all playing the game. Will ends up is about to leave because he's called to go home or whatever. So he leaves, but on the way home, I think he's taking some weird route or whatever, but he kind of goes off road and he just sees something and he freaks the fuck out and like runs. And I don't remember if he gets home right away or if I think he just goes right to the shed. No, he goes home and he still feels like something's following him. So he like run because he like sees like lights and shit flickering. So he ends up running to the shed and he feels something following him. So he like gets like a gun and shit and bullets together, and then the thing ends up coming out and captures him. And that's the beginning of the season. Will's gone and nobody knows what happened to him. His mom kind of gets up the next day, thinks he's in bed or thinks he left, and he's not there. So she freaks out. You learn that she has like anxiety issues, which is kind of obvious.
To put it lightly.
Yeah, his mom Joyce, who's played by Winona Ryder. And then he's got a brother Jonathan, who is also very awkward.
They're all very awkward.
Yeah.
They play Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, no, come on. That doesn't make you just weird. Okay,
9
whatever.
times out of 10 does.
Whatever. Anyway. Yeah, so basically everyone's trying to figure out what happened to him. His mom is like in a panic, so she goes to the police office to talk to the chief. Hopper, I forget who he's played by. I know his name, I just don't remember it off the top of my head. Who is a big asshole initially. Like, he just doesn't give a shit. He's just there to collect a paycheck. He's like, yeah, this is like the safest town ever. There's not going to be any fucking problems. And he like shrugs her off. But he ends up just taking down the information to, you know, pursue it going forward. And yeah, like nobody really kind of takes it seriously initially that he's gone. And you later see like the girl 11, who appears to have escaped from some kind of facility, which they didn't reveal right away what it is, and she goes to like this truck stop or something like that, where I forget his name. I think his name's Benny, like the dude from the truck stop, like sees her eating food in the where he goes to make it, and kind of is like, what the hell? And he stops her, and then he ends up giving her food. He kind of figures out that something's going on with her. Maybe she was like abused or something like that, because like she's wearing a gown, a nightgown. She's got like a tattooed number 11 on her. Her head's shaved. He's freaking wondering what the hell's going on. So he ends up calling what he thinks is social services, and instead it's really just the lab where she escaped from, who murders him and then tries to get her, because she has special abilities. Specifically, she's telepathic. Yeah. And it's kind of goes a little bit more into Hopper trying to find the kid. And you learn that he had a daughter who you initially just find out, he had a daughter and she's gone. We don't know why. She's just dead. I don't know anything about, I don't know what happened to his wife. I think at one point in the show he calls her or something. I don't remember. But anyway, they're going off on, he ends up getting a crew of people, like basically a manhunt to try and find him.
To find Will.
Yeah, to find Will. And meanwhile, the kids, the rest of the gang, are also trying to find him. And Hopper basically tells him, you can't go to where Will disappeared. I'm not allowing that. Go home. But they disobey him, and they go out in the night when it's raining to try and find him, and that's when they meet 11. And that was pretty much the first episode. As the kid, they encounter 11, Mike is like kind of instantly interested in her. He takes her back to his place. He takes her down in the basement and gives her like a place to stay and everything like that. He trying to kind of hides her from his parents. He doesn't want them to know that he found her. He feels like there's some kind of link between her and where Will disappears. So yeah, he kind of like takes her home, takes care of her, and you start learning a little bit about like Will's brother, right? Because he's not, I mean, I think he's going to school, but it doesn't seem like it. He seems to be like skipping it a lot. He enjoys taking pictures, and he's just kind of awkward. And okay, I mean, he's pretty cool so far. I mean, I don't know too much about him from the first season, but I guess he gets cooler going forward. Anyway, meanwhile, Mike's sister Nancy is really into this jock kid called Steve, who is a huge douche. Like, it's pretty obvious he's just like a player, and she's just like smitten with him, and her friend Barb is like, like, you sure you want to be with this guy? He's kind of a dick. And what did I say? So Steve ends up inviting, her to a party at his place because he basically just wants to get with her. And, she brings Barb too because she just feels weird going by herself. And you kind of start seeing like Hopper trying to date, you start seeing kind of more about Hopper and his like personality. He seems really depressed. There's like a scene of like him with like a woman that he slept with, and he just kind of like leaves her. It's really weird. Yeah. I mean, the big thing that happened in this episode really was the reveal at the end, where Nancy and Barb go to the party with Steve. I mean, to Steve's party, and they get drunk, and by they I mean everybody but Barb, and they decide to like go back in the house to do some hanky-panky stuff. And Barb's not into that shit, so she just sits at the pool. She's about to leave. Now Jonathan is there randomly too, just hiding in bushes, taking pictures of them from his camera, and he takes pictures of Barb too. And when he's not looking, Barb ends up getting taken by one of the creatures because she ends up having a cut on herself that draws the creature, the blood. So the big thing that happens at the end of the episode really is that Barb has been taken away too. And you also start seeing a little bit more about 11 and her being experimented on when she was still at the lab. Like that she's claustrophobic because they put her in this like room that just has a bunch of padded walls with no lights and just close it on her, to discipline her when she doesn't listen to them, to tell her to use her powers. So yeah, that's pretty fucking sad. Yeah. And see, the next episode really just opens with confirming that Barb is getting killed because it shows her in the other world, which they later call the Upside Down. And it's really just Nancy ended up screwing Steve. She tries to contact Barb, or she goes to school and Barb isn't there, so she freaks out and she's trying to figure out what's going on. Where's Barb? Meanwhile, 11 is, the kids figure out that 11 has powers, and that she knows something about Mike and how he left. I mean, Will and where he is, and specifically that they can't like call anybody to get her to get picked up because they were trying to get rid of her, and she was like, "Don't call anybody, or the bad people are gonna come and kill you and me."
Papa's gonna come.
Yeah, Papa, as she says. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of quickly go through this. There's like 8 episodes, so as it goes through the season, you start learning more about just what's going on with everything with the lab. So I'm gonna first let me touch on the lab. So the lab has been doing experiments on gifted individuals like 11. They haven't revealed anybody else. I know there's other ones because I've just seen that there are. I know that there's like some other people, just because it's like Game of Thrones. You can't not miss it. Like, I don't know the context, but I know that there are other gifted kids. And from what they've stated, they've been essentially kidnapping kids, whether they're babies or whatever, from parents. They like drug them to shit up, the moms. They like take the babies, and then they just like the moms end up getting so drugged up or like fucked up that they just go crazy, and then they experiment on the kids to have them gain these. Now, they haven't given details of if these kids are, if they're born with it or if they get it from like experiments. I don't know if they go into that in like other seasons, but
I don't remember 100%.
I'm gonna guess that the kids are just born with it. I don't know how they know that these parents are gonna have these kids with these abilities, but whatever. Anyway, they are primarily doing this, at least initially, for like espionage reasons. Like, they're doing it to because it's set in like the early 80s, for like Russian spying, like spying on Russians, shit like that. Because the people with these abilities can, once they're like they're telepathically communicating, like listen to the thoughts and the conversations of these other people that they're trying to spy on, which they can then relay on like radio-like devices so everyone else can hear it. And that's one of like 11's abilities, is that she can, when she has like a radio or something near her, she can communicate with somebody and have that relayed through the radio. What they later find is that not only can she obtain conversations from people in this world, she can also do it from the other world, the Upside Down, basically. And they are starting to experiment on her for that reason, because they want her to make some kind of contact with them, with these creatures, which inadvertently opens a portal to that other world in the lab, which is where the first episode sort of starts. And she realizes this, so she like runs away to escape from doing that shit. And also she has abilities to crush people's skulls. That's another thing.
She's pretty badass.
Yeah, she's pretty cool. So then you have the what's going on in the town, right? Because nobody really seems to know that about this lab or what the hell's going on with it in the town. There's like newspaper clippings and shit like that of the professor. I forget his fucking name. Did they even give him a name?
I don't think so.
Anyway, of him like getting sued for kidnapping people or something, but he was never charged or anything. But nobody really knows what they do. They just say like it's some kind of government facility, and nobody seems to know that there's just people missing from here and then.
I don't understand how. It's Indiana. Like, there can't be that many fucking people.
I mean, everybody knows everybody there.
Yeah,
and I mean, they make a point of saying that. But yeah, like there's people missing because of that. Not initially because of the creatures, just because of them kidnapping kids to experiment on them. Now people are missing because of the creatures, or creature in this. There's not multiple, at least not in this season. Probably are in others. Yeah, so Joyce, as I said, the mom of Will, whose son is missing, feels that Will is still around and that she wants to, and she can make contact with him. I forget what she initially gets it from, but she eventually starts buying lights.
The lights flicker.
Yeah, she sees like lights flicker and like phones ring and shit like that. And so she decides to buy a bunch of lights to
This is my favorite scene.
hopefully communicate with him, to use the lights as a communication method. And it does work, because she ends up finding it, like, he uses it as like a way to send her like a path to find things. He sends her like it as like binary code at one point, I think. And then she ends
initially,
up
and then she does the alphabet.
and then she makes an alphabet and she strings the lights to point to each letter so he can spell a message to it for her, which is pretty cool. But it's clear that Will is like kind of just running like around that area, like the upside down, trying to avoid this creature that's after him. I don't know how he survived for so long, because Barb basically dies within the first fucking like minute that she gets there. And this little kid manages to friggin' just escape for 7 episodes. You know, like, okay.
He's just that good.
I guess. Anyway, that aside, I think one of the coolest scenes was when she strings up those lights to spell out the alphabet. He basically spells out like run, and then the friggin' creature pops out of the wall and just chases her, and she freaks the fuck out and runs away. Meanwhile, Hopper is still trying to find Will, and he's starting to kind of piece together that something's going on with the town, with the lab, and that there's some kind of connection between Will's disappearance and that lab. He digs up the articles on like the missing kids. He finds a piece of a gown, which was Eleven's gown, near the gutter where she escaped. He kind of ties everything back to the lab and figures there's some kind of connection there. And it's really not until episode, I think 7 or 8, I think it's 7, where they kind of piece together that it wasn't actually Will's gown, it was Eleven's, and 11 is one of the girls who disappeared. And they even end up talking to, like, well, not even really talking. They end up meeting her mom, who is like catatonic. She's basically can't even talk or anything. And they figure out that, you know, what the lab's been doing. They've been experimenting on kids. And Hopper goes to the lab. He basically breaks in and finds the portal and goes into the portal. And like, well, he tries to go into the portal and they stop him. But basically he starts believing all the shit that Joyce says, because he initially didn't believe that there's a creature.
He thought he was, or
she was crazy.
Thought he was crazy.
He thought she was
yes,
crazy.
Thank you.
Because he thought it was like all grief, because you know, he's like, I lost my daughter too, you know, or I lost my child also. I understand grief and everything, that you start thinking things. But it's clear when he sees that, he's like, she's not fucking lying. There's something going on. And Nancy also feels like there's something going on, because she can't find Barb, and she tries to go back to Steve's place and sees the creature and freaks the fuck out. And I think one of the turning points there was when she talks to Jonathan, because Jonathan doesn't believe his mom either. As in, she tells him, even when she says she saw like a creature coming after her, he doesn't believe her. She says it was like something that didn't have a face. And then when he talks to Nancy, he goes like, what did you see? And she goes, something without a face. And he's like, oh shit. So
they're not crazy.
So they try and capture this creature. They're trying to, you know, find Barb, and she inadvertently enters a portal to the upside down, Nancy, and sees the fucking creature, and escapes, luckily. I kind of fucking knew it, because I knew she was alive in season 2. But yeah, she escapes, and you know, they kind of like, everybody's starting to believe what's going on now. I'm trying to think what else to add before I get to like the main meat of the ending. It's, yeah, I mean, there's pretty much every character has this kind of moment where they don't believe what's going on. The kids don't really believe that 11 has abilities, and then they kind of reveal that, but then they think she's jerking them around in terms of like that she knows where Will is, because like there was a moment where they see like Will's dead body in the lake, and so they think like that she's been lying this entire time. When it's revealed, shit, I don't know how much I want to reveal this. Trying to think when I want to stop. You know what? Fuck it. If you're gonna, it's 2016. I'll get to the ending and I'll put a pause there. Okay, but I'll put a timestamp. All right, and then we'll go to the end and I'll read my thoughts. But there's a lot to talk about without spoiling everything. Every fucking episode has like a spoiler, so I don't know what to fucking say. Like, okay. Anyway, Will is not dead, even though there was a body. It was actually a fake body that the government had prepared to throw people off the chase of, what the hell's going on. And it's revealed that he's fake because Hopper breaks into the morgue and cuts him open because he feels that his body doesn't feel right and finds his body stuffed. And so that's one of the things that leads them to believe something's going on with the lab and that they're lying. So yeah, when it kind of gets to the end, what they're trying to do essentially is, one, find Will. I don't know why I keep they look really similar, Mike and Will.
They do.
Yeah, they're trying to find Will, and two, they're trying to find the creature. So they devise a plan with 11 to enter this pool, which she does to help communicate a little bit better, to find Will. And they do this, except it ends up summoning the creature to come at them. Meanwhile, the lab knows where 11 is now, and they're trying to find her and get her. And they're trying to do whatever they can to do that. So, they end up going to this. Everyone's basically at the school now because it's empty, which I think I skipped the part that I wanted to talk about. Oh, yeah, I did. I skipped the part. No, that's at the end. Sorry. Okay. All right. So they end up going to the school to get a bunch of materials so they can build this device where that can mock up what 11 can use to then find Will, because whatever they're using isn't good enough to track him down. But the issue with that is that when she uses this device and gets that close, there's a chance of the creature finding her. So she goes in and she manages to get to find out where he is, but she gets pretty fucked up, she's bleeding a lot and everything like that. They manage to get her out just in time, but that also summons the creature to come after them. I forget what the fuck they call it. It's some kind of name. Do you remember?
I'll look it up while you talk.
Okay. Anyway,
it's on the tip of my tongue.
The lab is trying to get to 11. They end up what was this? They end up locking down where the kids are. Mm-hmm. They are about to grab her, and she ends up fucking killing most of the lab people. And then the creature comes after them.
A Demogorgon.
Yeah, Demogorgon. Cool. It's a dumb name. Yeah, and what?
Nothing.
Let me go back to my notes real quick.
You're just that's a dumb name.
It kind of is.
They have to be original.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the creature is coming after the kids. It's about to take them down, and 11 ends up stopping it, but it seems like she's going to sacrifice herself to kill the creature. I know she's not dead, because I've seen scenes of the other season where she's still fucking alive, but it is still pretty, pretty interesting. They do manage to get Will back. I'm trying to remember how they did it. I
think Hopper found him.
Yeah, Hopper and... Okay, I remember. Hopper and Joyce strike a deal with the lab to go into the portal to find Will. The trade-off is that, they can... I think they said they can just take 11 back.
Oh, yeah, that they would give 11 back.
Yeah, which is kind of fucked up, but yeah, okay. So they go into the portal, and they manage to find Will, but he's in such a position where it looks like he's going to die. So they give him CPR, and it at that point, this is probably one of my favorite scenes because they're flashing back and forth between this happening and Hopper's kid dying. Because it shows like his kid, I'm assuming, has cancer. And the kid, they're showing the kid on her deathbed, like just dying, and like the pulse is like going down while they're trying to give CPR to Will and have his like pulse come back up. And it's just cutting back and forth at those scenes, and then Will like wakes up. So it's pretty fucking sad, but I was like, that was some good cuts right there. That's some good direction. And so they managed to revive Will. They bring him back, and he gets hospitalized. 11's gone for now. I know she's gonna be back, and kind of everybody's shit starts wrapping up. Hopper is back doing his own thing, working as a cop. Joyce is sitting at the table with Mike and Will, who Will goes off to the bathroom and then throws up like a fucking tentacle or something. So clearly that's gonna go into season 2. And then they're all other than that, it looks like Nancy's back with Steve, even though she gives Jonathan a camera. I didn't get that. I was like, why the fuck did you go back with Steve? Steve was an asshole. I mean, even though he helped you guys out at the end, he's still a fucking asshole. I glazed over that part, but basically...
He changes a lot in season 2.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really like Steve that much.
I didn't like him as much in season 1, but season 2, definitely, he made a really good comeback, so...
Okay. Alright. So, I know I've talked a lot about the story. I know that I've glazed over some things, but it is kind of long, and I feel like a lot of people have already seen this, so I didn't want to spend too much time on it. So, that being said, let me go to my ratings.
Okay.
So, the story. Gave the story a 4.
Okay.
Thought the story was really good. There wasn't too many things that I didn't like about it. There was just small things here or there that kind of like that I didn't like, but nothing major. It wasn't a horrible. I mean, it was a good story. I enjoyed it. I think there were other aspects that I liked more than the story, but I still liked the story.
Fair
and
enough.
Those other aspects being like the characters. So the characters I gave a 5. Even the characters I didn't like, I still liked the acting there because they did a good job of not making most of the characters just one note. Like, even though Steve is an asshole, he still has points in the show where he kind of knows that and tries to make an effort, like at the end of the season, which I thought was good. Hopper, who I initially did not like from the first episode, became like probably one of my favorite characters because he's really cool. He's definitely troubled because of what happened to his daughter.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why he was an asshole in the beginning, because you don't know his story, like his backstory. Like he doesn't open up to very many people. He doesn't really like let them in and get to know him and whatnot. But his backstory kind of drives his personality. Yeah,
I feel like he takes alongside like the boys probably take one of the more active roles in the series. You see a lot of him in this show, and as it went on, I liked him a lot more and more because he initially starts off as just like a dude who doesn't give a shit, and his 2 officers that are with him are just like that too. But as it goes on, the season, they're still like that, and he gets angry at them because they're not taking things seriously. Yeah. Which is funny because he didn't take things serious. He did not take things seriously from the beginning, and it shows that he had some growth during that season, and I thought that was good. I liked pretty much most of the other characters too. 11 I thought was really cool. I liked the acting there that she had. I have to look up the actress's name, but I thought it was really good because it showed her as just obviously someone who's not used to people, right? Because she's been in like a lab away from everybody throughout her entire life. So she's awkward, obviously, but she is still really nice and also a badass because she killed a fuck ton of people.
She can crush somebody's skull.
Yeah. Mike was pretty cool too. I liked his interactions with 11, as well as the whole group was pretty good. I thought
It's a good dynamic between all of them.
They did feel like actual like friends who've been together for years, which I thought was good. So the casting there was really well done. Joyce, good anxious scared mom role. No, yeah, she's definitely sold that role of someone who's just like really nervous all the time. Her ex-husband is this total asshole, and I liked when she kicked him the fuck out, which I thought was funny. Jonathan is fine. I mean, I thought he was just kind of creepy most of the season, to be honest. But he still, I mean, he just seemed like that creepy like dude. Like awkward kid who, no offense to you if you were awkward in high school, I was too, but he's just a little weird. And like I think the scenes of him taking pictures was kind of what made
really creepy.
I think that's kind of where I was like, okay, that's not cool, dude. Like that's a little weird. But yeah, I mean, pretty much all the characters were good. That's why I gave it a 5. The direction cinematography, I also gave a 5. There were a lot of good scenes in this. A lot of points where I was like, the panning is really good. The cuts are great. It's using good lighting at this time. I thought like some of the techniques they did with the flashing lights and shit was cool. The creatures popping out of the walls and stuff. And as I mentioned, towards the end of the 8th episode, the scene of going back and forth between Will and Hopper's daughter, I thought was like really impactful. I was like, this is a great scene, you know. I made a note of that specific scene. So yeah, I gave it a 5. It was really well done. The music as well, I gave a 5. As I said, I don't really give a shit about 80s aesthetic that much. I do like that they didn't really use a lot of actual like 80s music.
Yeah.
It was mostly like the tone, right? So it was like synth music, you know, which is, I like synth music. So I'm going to say, I don't hate everything about the 80s. There's things I like about the 80s. I just don't like when they shove it down your fucking throat, because it's just like, it's almost like they're like, don't you remember how great the 80s was? And I was like, number one, no, I don't, because I wasn't alive then. I was born in 1990, so I don't remember the 80s. Number two, as far as I know, the 80s fucking sucked, because you had like just like a huge AIDS outbreak, which people were trying to blame solely on, you know, gay and lesbian people, and that wasn't the fucking problem. You know, it's just like, I was like, I don't know why you fucking romanticized the 80s. It really wasn't that great. Okay, so, but regardless, it had good music, is what I'm saying. I would totally download some of that music and listen to it just by itself, because it's a good soundtrack, and I like that type of synth music. And even the sound effects were really good. There were a couple more moments where in the season where I got fucking freaked out for a second, because I saw something, I was like, shit. Yeah, it was good. Good music and sound design. Overall enjoyment. Really good season. I know now why a lot of people say that this. Now, I don't know about the other seasons, but I know now why people at least like this season a lot, because it is really good. And again, if you want to sell me on something, never fucking come up to me and tell me this is a great 80s or 90s or whatever the fuck thing and as the sole reason for why this is good. Unless there's like something about it that like is, you know, like there's movies that I've seen like mid 90s. That's a movie that is about, but it's called that, and it's set in the 90s, but it's about like what it was like then for like someone growing up in the 90s, you know, a little bit different than, hey, you know, this is a great 80s thing, you know, it has so many good 80s references, I don't fucking care. So overall enjoyment, I gave a 5. Not going to tell you what that adds up to, but this is probably the highest rated thing you've given me, because it's that good. I am probably interested in seeing the second season now.
I'll rewatch it with you.
So I've heard, and I don't know how true this
better.
is that the first season's the best, second season is not quite as good, but still good, and the third season is okay. And they're apparently doing a fourth season too.
They are.
And I've heard for the second season there is a one specific episode that is essentially a plug for a series that I don't know if they have. Apparently, it was supposed to be a spin-off series they're trying to do.
Yeah, I know. I know exactly which episode you're talking about, and they.
Yeah, and I don't really like that when people do that, because it's like
it seemed very out of place in the
right.
whole entire season. It was just like, what the fuck?
I'm okay with there being like one-off episodes, but if you're doing it with the intent of trying to sell a different series, that kind of, I don't like that. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's Stranger Things season 1.
Okay.
So your series I gave you.
You gave me Anohana.
Yep.
Is that how you
Anohana.
pronounce it? Okay.
It actually has a longer title that it has a Japanese title that's fucking long as shit.
It's not important.
But it doesn't matter. It's Anohana.
So Anohana was directed by Tatsuki Nagai and was written by, how do you say his name? Mari Okada?
Her. Mari Okada.
Sorry, her.
Yeah.
Mari Okada. This apparently has been in a whole bunch of different kind of like, I don't want to say, I don't know the right word to say it, but it's basically been a manga, it's been a game, it's been a TV show, it's been a movie. So it's basically been around the block for quite a long time.
Yeah.
The specific anime that I watched was from 2011, was when it originally aired. So the premise of this anime falls around a group of friends who are, and I'm going to refer to these characters as basically how they refer to themselves in the season, but there's a couple of different names for each of the characters that they kind of get thrown around. So I just picked the ones that were easiest to spell and easiest for me to pronounce. So for the group of friends, you have Jintan, who is the main character in kind of the whole entire series. You have Anjo, who is a friend of the group. You have Sudoku, you have Yuki, and then you have Menma. Now, Menma is essentially a ghost who is basically appears herself to only Jintan. Now, the whole entire series revolves around this one entire incident in their childhood. So, to put it in perspective, these five people were friends probably I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, prior to when series is actually taking place.
Sometime in grade school.
Yeah. So they were in grade school, they were all friends. They called themselves
like super busters or something like that.
I forget. It's not really important. So they basically formed this group and they gave themselves a nickname, and Jintan was kind of the leader of this group. Everyone followed him, and what had happened was Anjo had asked Jintan if he liked Menma, and he, being the grade school person that he is and being a boy, was just like, no, she's so ugly, and kind of like got embarrassed and stormed off. So Menma kind of ran after him, and in the process of her running after him, she ends up falling down to the river or wherever it was, and she ends up drowning and dying. So this whole entire series revolves around that one entire moment of how she basically dies, and how the other 4 of them, it starts out in the series where their friendship is really like no longer. It's kind of like in shambles after the whole entire situation, and it's exploring kind of how they all feel guilty in some way or form for how Menma had died, and they all feel like it's their fault. So I have to say, I think this is one of my favorite ones that you've given me.
Oh, I thought it was going to be something you'd like.
So we might be very, very close.
Okay.
So story, I'm just going to kind of go through everything. I'm going to go through the episodes because it's probably the easiest way to do that. So for this series, it's 11 episodes. It's super short. I binge watched it probably in about 2 days. So if you want something that is kind of lighthearted in a sense and it gives you all the feels, like, I definitely recommend it. This series destroyed me at the end. Like,
Were you crying at the last part?
Sobbing. I was like praying to God. I was like, okay, please don't come downstairs because I knew you were gonna give me shit for crying. I was like, oh my God. But you guys will know why I was sobbing at the end. So this series, it started out with Jintan just playing video games. He was making ramen. His dad comes in. Automatically, you kind of realize that Menma is not seen, at least by his dad, and that Jintan can, in fact, see him. And this is kind of where you start flashing back and forth between their childhood, and when Menma came back, she makes a reference to the fact that she has a wish that she once granted. And so Jintan he figures that he's imagining her from all the stress and trauma that he's basically gone through for the past 5 years from her passing away, and that other people can't see her. So it sets up the storyline to make it seem, like I said, how the friends are no longer talking and they're no longer friendly, but you definitely get a sense that Menma, one of her overarching goals, I feel like, from the very first episode, it was very aware that she wanted the group of them to come back together, and it was the Super Peace Busters. I just remembered. So right away, it kind of pans to a scene where Jintan is kind of just walking along. Menma is following along with him, obviously, because she's still trying to figure out the wish that she once granted, because she makes it seem like she doesn't know what she wants. He runs into an old friend, which we find out is Yuki and Sudoku, where Yuki was kind of basically a dick to him and just saying all these kinds of things that were not really important at the time. But he kind of like runs away because he's judging them for the fact that he's not going to school, and he's judging him when he brings up Menma, because we find out later that Yuki is harboring some like really deep trauma. It flashes back to their childhood again, and it just kind of explores a little bit more how she did die. And the last scene in that episode is of Menma visiting her home, and she's of her seeing her family. And after Menma died, you realize that the group kind of just fell apart. So it's just like, oh, I hope these people get back together. And I mean, kind of just thinking about the episode or the season in general, I was like, they're definitely going to get back together, but I'm like interested to see how it's actually going to happen. So they come back, or Jintan comes back into contact with an old friend called Popo, and he tells him of the fact that he's now seeing Menma. Now, Popo is really the only one that initially believes him by the fact that he is seeing Menma. Everybody else in the group is just kind of like, you're fucking crazy. Like, stop bringing up her name because you're just inflicting trauma, inflicting pain on us. Like, stop bringing it up. And then there's also an instance where Anjo and Sudoku meet up accidentally, and she keeps saying that she's trying too hard to be like Menma, which Anjo is trying too hard to be like Menma for reasons that we'll get into a little bit later. And Sudoku's just kind of like bringing that to light, and she's saying that no matter where Anjo goes and no matter who she's with, she takes liking to them, and she changes her personality. So the groups of girls that she's hanging around with are not the best groups of girls. They're kind of like sluts. So she kind of just like changes her persona to kind of match those that she's hanging around with.
Right.
You also find out that the reason that Anjo thinks it's her fault that Menma died was because of the fact that she was the one that asked Jintan about his feelings in regards to Menma. And that was kind of like the first instance where you see one of them kind of confess that they have like harboring feelings for Menma. And then it kind of just snowballs from there. Yuki runs into Popo and shares that Jitan is seeing Menma. There's just like a whole bunch of jealousy between the whole entire group that you can definitely tell that there's just so many bad feelings within the group that they clearly all need to be healed and go to therapy, because it was just like, it was a lot. So it's at this point where you find out that Anjo is jealous of Menma because she liked Jintan. So Anjo she has this like serious crush, like she's desperately in love with Jintan, and that's one of the reasons why she was trying so hard to be like Menma and why she asked them the question. So this is the first episode where they try to find out Menma's wish, and this is like really reaching, but they think Menma's wish is to play Pokemon Gold. I was like, what the fuck is this? Actually no, Nokemon Gold, sorry.
Gotta catch them all.
Yeah, exactly.
Them all Nokemons.
I can't. So they go over to Anjo's house because they realize that Anjo is literally the only one in town that would probably still have this Pokemon Gold game. And you kind of start to see the feelings that Anjo is still harboring for Jintan all those years later. And then they finally catch the rare Pokemon that they were trying to catch, and they thought that because they caught the Pokemon that Menma would disappear, but she didn't. Go figure. Because, my lifelong goal is to catch a rare Pokemon. I cannot. So, episode 3, Jintan is going back to school to kind of repay Anjo, and that he kind of takes it as a sense where, oh, well, maybe this is Menma's wish, that if I go back to school, that she'll disappear. And so he runs into Anjo and her friends on the way to school, and they basically start to mock him, and he decides to leave. And then we also start seeing instances of potentially that other people in the group are also seeing Menma. So Popo thinks that he did see Menma when he was staying in the woods, because he's staying at their like secret loft. And then there's also flashbacks to when his mom was sick and he asked for like steamed bread, and Menma decides to make it herself. This is just like a feel-good episode. It's kind of like the first episode where all of them kind of like come back together. So Popo kind of like decides to get all the friends back together for a barbecue. And they kind of make a pact to say that they want to try to figure out what the wish is that Menma wants. And this is also where Yuki claims that he can now see Menma. And you're kind of thinking like, okay, well, clearly Jintan is really the only one that can see him, or to see her. And in my mind, I was like, yo, Yuki's being the biggest fucking dick right now, because clearly he's lying out his teeth. I was like, at that instance, I was like, yo, this guy, I cannot with him. But I digress, because you see kind of the reason for it. Episode 4, we see all the friends head to the river to see if they can find Menma. They don't find anybody. Yuki keeps claiming that he can see Menma and that she wants them to let her rest in peace. Clearly, we know that that's not what Menma wants, because Jintan is telling the group that she's happy that they're all back together. Sudoku also kind of alludes to seeing Menma as well, and she goes to see Jintan to try to confront Yuki about his Menma being a fake. So they kind of try to set Yuki up to see if he really is telling the truth, because nobody in the group essentially believes him. And I literally wrote in my notes, Yuki is a dick. Like, at that point, I was just like, wow. So they do something, I forget what it was exactly, but they basically convince Yuki to kind of try to prove that he saw Menma. And it pans to another shot of all of them in the secret hideaway, and they say, Popo said that he saw her again in the woods. So they all start like running through the woods trying to catch her, and then you find out that it's not Menma, it was Yuki cross-dressing and impersonating Menma in the woods.
Yep.
So I was I did not see that coming, like,
sure you didn't
at all. I kind of thought that like Yuki was definitely like off, but
Dude's got some issues, man. He's trying to resolve.
Yeah, and like even by the whole entire end of the series, I don't think he's resolved any of them. But
hey, if he wants to dress as Menma, whatever makes him happy, you know.
I mean, like looking back at it now, like it makes sense. But like as it was happening, I was just like, oh my god. That was just like the first time I was like thrown for the loop. So Yuki thinks Menma died because of him. So this is kind of where we see Yuki's kind of trauma come to life. He thinks that Menma would show up to him. He thinks that Menma should show up to him to haunt him because that's why he thinks that Menma died, essentially. So Jintan tries to convince Yuki that she is here by saying that she liked the hair clip that he gave her. And there was a childhood flashback to Yuki giving Menma a clip for her hair as she was running away trying to go after Jintan. And it was also of Yuki confessing his undying love for Menma, which is still fucking very apparent in this whole entire series. Like, to the point where it's kind of, like, obsessive. And Yuki seems to kind of be having, like, a mental breakdown at this point. And in this episode, it kind of, like, pans to Sudoku sitting in her room, and she's, like, wearing this clip. And, like, in my mind, I'm like, does Sudoku have the clip that Yuki threw in the woods in their childhood, like, after Menma ran away? And I was like, yep, she does. I was like, yo, they're all fucking in love with each other. Like, what the hell? So there's kind of, like, a side story to this. So Anjo kind of goes into the city to hang out with her, like, slutty friends. They go to like hang out with these, I guess, college guys or high school guys or whatever they were. And one of them essentially kind of like convinces her to like leave with him because she thought he was going to walk her to the train station, when in fact he really walked her to a love hotel and thought that she was going to fuck him. So she literally almost gets raped, basically in the street, and Yuki kind of finds her and stops them. And this point, it's like, so Yuki asks Anjo out, and in my mind I'm like, but you love Menma and Anjo loves Jintan. I'm like, how is this gonna work? And so she obviously declines because she still has something for Jintan, and Menma gets upset at this point because Popo keeps talking about heaven, and she's like confused about why she's actually stuck there in the first place. So that's kind of like the halfway point in this series, and I was like engrossed and like I couldn't stop watching. I was like, I need to know what happens. So episode 6, Jintan is trying to figure out why Menma hasn't moved on to heaven and why she's still there. He's still trying to go back to school again to see if that's her unfinished business, but it turns out that's really not. He still needs to go to school though, and eventually does. This is the part kind of where Anjo, she goes back to school and everybody finds out about the love hotel scene, and everyone is essentially calling her a slut, and Jintan kind of stood up for her and made a fool of her, made a fool of himself in front of everyone, essentially saying like, how can you keep on talking about this person that went to a love hotel when I've known her for X, Y, and Z years and she would never do that? And you're not talking about the person who hasn't been to school in 5 years. Like, start talking about me. Like, he literally had this whole entire discussion with himself in the middle of the classroom. But it was nice to see him kind of like stand up for Anjo in a sense. They also, so Anjo, Popo, and Jitan, they go to Menma's house to try to find something to figure out for her wish, and this is where the whole diary comes into play. So they get her diary in hopes that it will help. Menma gets like really upset that they actually went to her house because she said that she doesn't want her mom to be sad, and every time like she thinks of Menma, she kind of gets engrossed with the fact that she has passed away, and she basically wants her mom to forget about her. And Jintan ends up getting upset with her because she always puts other people before herself, when in retrospect, that's exactly what he fucking does as well. I'm like, this is why you guys are perfect for each other. So they end up finding something in her diary that they think might be her wish, and it's to use a rocket to send a message to heaven. Yuki kind of seems very pessimistic about the whole entire idea, and he's like never wanting to believe anything, kind of just Like, he feels like something is going to just implode at any moment. So they start thinking about this idea and start figuring out how they can actually come across and do the plan. Yuki and Sudoku seem to remember a conversation or a meeting right before Menma died, and they think this is what the wish is really about, for what Menma wanted to share with them, but they couldn't really figure out the details at that point. They're also trying to figure out and work on the rocket to raise the money to get it built, and eventually they find out the person that was going to give them the gunpowder to actually make the rocket, somebody ended up finding out about it, which was Menma's dad, and he shut it down. And so they kind of are left to figure out how they can kind of go about it to try to make this rocket in Menma's name so that way she can pass on to heaven, but they're trying to figure out like what they can do to convince Menma's dad to persuade them. So that's kind of what episode 8 is about. They go back to Menma's house to try and convince her mom, because they thought that her mom was like the one that I guess would be on their side to kind of give a memorial for her daughter. But come to find out, Menma's mom blames the whole group for her daughter dying in the first place. So she has like a lot of like underlying like anger towards them, and you can definitely tell that she does not have their best interest at heart. Yuki blames Jintan for bringing Menma back up again and forcing his trauma on others, which I could see in a sense, but I'm like, at the same time, like, he really is seeing Menma and he's just trying to like give the message along and whatnot. So he kind of like starts to think badly about himself, like, okay, well, everybody in this group, I'm like making them feel bad and making them feel all these different things, and trauma was being brought up. So he basically essentially says that he's gonna figure out the wish for himself. And I loved this scene. It was so nice. Anjo finally admits that she loves Jintan in kind of a scene where they're working together in a video store or video game, whatever it is, and he walks out because he ended up passing out from working too many jobs, and she just got so frustrated with him always putting other people before himself, and he's not sleeping. And she admits that she loves him even now and tries to get Jintan to slow down because he passed out, and says that as soon as her wish is granted, that Menma will disappear, and that has this unhealthy obsession with trying to have her pass on, but he really didn't stop to think about the fact that when she does pass on, like, she's going to disappear and like she's not coming back again. So Jintan knows that as soon as that she does disappear again, it will hurt, and Menma hears Popo talking on the phone about the rest of the friends not believing that she's back, so she runs home and kind of calls all them. And so this is kind of where all the friends are pointing fingers at Jintan, saying that he keeps on bringing up Menma, and he really doesn't have any proof to show them that Menma really does exist.
Yeah. And
the phone calls that were happening were Menma calling each of them to try to tell them about the wish and to try to persuade them to kind of come back together. But obviously, because she's a ghost, like, they can't hear her. So they all end up back at the hideout, and she's trying to figure out a way to prove to them that she really is there. So she writes in her diary and drops it on the floor for them to realize that she is there. And I was just like, that's so cool that her diary was kind of like the key to like breaking everything open. I was like, that was very clever. Episode 9, they're still trying to do the rocket. Yuki and Tsudoku realize that it's not Menma's father that didn't want the fireworks. It was her mom that was kind of destroying the whole entire fact, because she thinks that she just wants her daughter to like rest in peace, and that they keep on bringing up everything and she just can't deal with it. So Yuki takes it upon himself to go and find Menma's dad, and he confesses that he loved his daughter and begs him to reconsider. His dad ends up changing his mind or convinces his mom and gives him the okay to help with the rocket. Yuki is again mad at Jintan because he's the only one that can see Menma. He's like still harboring those feelings for Menma, and he just feels like he should also be able to see her. Again, Menma can only communicate through her diary, but no other forms of paper. So, like, she tried to write on another piece of paper when they were sitting around their table and they were eating that bread thing, and she couldn't write on the paper. And Menma, you see kind of at this point where you realize how attached Jintan is to Menma, because there was a scene at the very end of this episode where Menma is looking at this fish in a river, and she goes to get a closer look of it, and she walks up to the edge of the river. And because Menma had died from drowning, Jintan thought that if she touched the river, she would, like, disappear or drown again or whatever it might be. So he literally goes to her and, like, grabs her and essentially tells her, like, no, you can't go into the river. So you really kind of see, like, how attached Jintan is to her at that point. And he almost has, like, an unhealthy attachment to the fact how, like, Yuki is, but he's a little bit more sane about it. Yuki definitely has a lot more issues.
He is definitely desperate though at this point. Like, Jintan is, like, almost,
because he's realizing that it's getting closer, because at this point they know that the rocket is going to go off the next day.
Yeah. And
that once the rocket goes off, that she would disappear.
Right.
So there's that. Okay, so episode 10 is all about the rocket that they have been planning for weeks and on end. They've been building. Popo's throwing Menma going away party. Sudoku is basically blaming Yuki for being a coward and not helping Menma go to heaven, because Yuki said that he was not going to go to it, and he realized that she's right. Like, I need to stop being selfish. I need to let Menma pass on to go to heaven. Sudoku also said that she remembered what Menma wanted to meet about, and she needed them to help her do something for Jintan. And then it's also at this point where you kind of see some more flashbacks between, like, Jintan and his mom a little bit, just kind of, like, talking about, like, how she passed away, and kind of, like, the underlying kind of, like, I guess, like, fear or guilt or whatever it was, just for how she passed away in general. So Yuki says this is where I was like, you're still a fucking dick. So Yuki wants to reenact the moment that Jintan runs out and Menma follows him. And it's at this point where Jintan finally admits that he does like Menma, because he's never actually apologized to Menma for the fact that he essentially called her ugly.
Yeah.
And ran out. So he admits that he does like Menma. Sudoku admits that she loves Yuki. Menma admits that she likes Jintan. Jintan tells her to stay instead of going to heaven, but she said that she has to in order for her to be reincarnated, so she can talk to everyone again. Because Menma, if you guys haven't realized by now, she's very, like, she is not concerned about herself. She's always concerned about others, and she doesn't want herself to only be visible to Jintan. She wants to also be visible to the other friends as well. So, the plan goes forward because he realizes that, and the group realizes that she needs to go to heaven. And Jintan actually ends up inviting Menma's family, and all of the friends besides Jintan want her to go. And you start to see, like, Jintan kind of start second guessing himself. We're like, well, what if she stays? Like, she can just stay with me, like, forever, and yada, yada, yada. And he's being really selfish at this point, but he's also being really desperate as well. So at the end of this episode, the rocket is launched right as Jintan tries to stop it. So he goes to try to stop it, and right as he walks, the rocket is launched. So this is episode 11. I'm going to start spoiling things, so if you don't want to listen to the ending of this, go to the timestamp that's listed in the description. So, this is where I absolutely fucking was destroyed, and I lost my mind. So, they fired the rocket, and Menma was still there.
Right.
So Jintan sneaks out of the house to meet up with the rest of the group, and Menma's looking as if she's starting to, like, disappear. And it's at this point where you start to see a little bits and pieces of it as well, and I kind of alluded to a little bit of it. Throughout the course of the series, we start to see the flashbacks between Jintan and his mom, and And you see Menma having those flashbacks as well. So it's not only Jintan having the flashbacks, it's Menma more so. And she's remembering this conversation that she had with Jintan's mom right before she passed away. And that's where she kind of got the idea for reincarnation, because Jintan's mom knew she was going to be dying and that she was okay with it. And she was at peace because she knew that she was going to be reincarnated as a baby something. It could be a baby human, a dog, a flower, whatever it was. So she definitely plays a very, very large role in how Menma will eventually get to heaven. So, excuse me. Menma looks as if she's starting to disappear again. It's at this point, the group literally, like, implodes on itself. Anjo and Sudoku go at it. Sudoku admits she loves Yuki again, but that she was really jealous of Anjo all those years. And this whole entire 25 minutes, I was literally just staring at the TV. I was like, oh my God. It was just like one thing after another. And then we also find out why Popo is harboring feelings of that he was feeling guilty. So he admitted that he saw Menma drowning and that he couldn't save her because he was being a coward. They realized that they were not thinking of Menma at all when they were trying to get her to heaven, but really of themselves. So Anjo was trying to get her to heaven so that she can have Jintan to herself. Sudoku was trying to get her to go to heaven so that way Anjo can go to Jintan and that way Sudoku can go to Yuki. And Yuki was trying to get her to go to heaven. I guess he was really the only one, I guess, in a sense that
I think it's more he's probably jealous of her being able to be with Jintan.
Yeah, that's true. Because he didn't want Jintan to be the only one there. And then Popo because he saw her drowning.
Right, and he felt guilty for it. And
I would
wanted
feel
to,
upset.
I mean, yeah, like too. Jesus fucking shit.
Oh my goodness. So they basically all come to a consensus that they're going to grant her wish no matter what. And it's at this point where Jintan goes back to get Menma and realizes that she's disappearing and really going to heaven and the afterlife. And it's at this point where she realizes that what her wish was, and it was a promise that she made to Jintan's mom, and it was to make Jintan cry. And I was just like, what are you doing to my emotions right now? I was like, oh my God. So he basically grabs Menma to try to bring her to their base so that they all can say goodbye to her. And this ending destroyed me.
I bet it did.
Oh my God. Like I literally want to cry just like thinking about it right
I'm
now.
sure like as soon as you got to the part where they open the letters, you're just like, ah!
Yeah, literally. So he grabs Menma to try to bring her to the base to get to have them all say goodbye. And when he eventually gets to the base, Jintan actually stops seeing Menma, but he can still hear her. So you start to kind of figure out that they used to play hide and seek when they were younger, and so they kind of reenact the scene of hide and seek. But obviously Menma realizes that she's about to pass on, so she uses all of her strength left to essentially write them all letters to tell them like what she likes best about them, and leaves it under the tree. And so they basically all chant, "Are you ready?" to act as if they're playing hide and seek. When she answers, "I am ready," they can all like see her and hear her. And then she like passes on because they all say that they found her. And I was just like, like I want to cry thinking about it right now.
What did you think of the notes though that she left them?
I really liked the notes that she left them because it kind of like, it pulled their character out, and I was just like, this is exactly how I would describe their character. It was like very spot on. And it was like very personal, so.
Okay. So then what happens at the very end after she disappears? Do you remember?
I don't even know.
Well, after she disappears, like it has like a little scene where like it's them afterwards. You don't remember seeing that?
Oh, they were like, they promised to like keep her wish alive or whatever?
Yeah, and like Anjo is like meeting up with Jintan again because it looks like she's trying to like, you know, get together with him or something. And
did I not watch that scene?
I don't know. Did you?
I might have missed that. Was it after the credits?
I don't remember.
I'll have to look. I don't remember that.
Yeah, there's like a scene like that shows like all of them afterwards.
I don't know. I was like so destroyed at that point where I was just like trying to like compose myself. So if you're just joining us back, if you have not watched this anime, please go and watch it. I will tell you, it is. I almost think I like this better than Your Lie in April.
Yeah, there's parts of Your Lie in April I like more. Like I like some of the scenes I like with the piano are really good.
Yeah. But like just like the general story.
Yeah, the story I think's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would definitely probably put this on like my top 5 anime now.
Okay. What did you give the story?
Okay. So I gave it a 5.
Okay.
I said I was compelled the whole time and kept wanting to know like what was going to happen. This was the first show that you ever given me where I didn't have to like force myself to get through it. Like I was generally sad when this was over. So I was like, okay, well, is there a season 2? And
there's not a season 2.
That's the thing with anime. I mean, it's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time where you don't want to destroy it. So I guess there's that. I said it was very compelling, and there were a few curveballs in there as well as like that I did not see coming. Especially like the whole entire thing at the end with the whole entire wish, which I will not repeat it just so that I don't spoil the ending again. But that and the whole thing with like Yuki and his like really his trauma and whatnot, the hair clip that Sudoku eventually went to go find, and just the whole aspect that I felt like, number one, I feel bad for Popo because nobody loves Popo.
I love Popo.
I love Popo, but in like, I felt like there was just so many like intertwining like love triangles through this whole entire thing because it was Jintan and Menma, then it was Anjo pining after Jintan, and Sudoku was pining after Yuki, and Yuki was pining over Menma, and nobody like really.
I think that's what makes Popo interesting, though, is that he seems like the most stable out of all of them, right?
Yeah, but there are a couple instances where he started to like...
Yeah, he cracks, but there's like... you feel like when you first meet him, you're like, okay, this is like the most mature dude. He's got... he's traveling a lot. He's got it, going, and then you find out his main thing, and you're just like, damn. Shit, man, like... You don't have it all together. Okay, characters?
Okay, so characters. So we talked about the main characters was Jintan, Menma, Anjo, Yuki, Sudoku, and Popo. Jintan was the leader of the group. He self-pities himself in the beginning, but eventually evolves based on his love for Menma. He can be selfish at times and feels Menma's death is his fault for saying those unkind words to her so long ago. Menma, we talked about, she's the ghost in the story and can only be seen by Jintan, is brought back to complete a wish from a while ago, and is always happy and go lucky and puts others before herself. Anjo, secretly in love with Jintan, wants to be exactly like Menma. She's also a really big follower, and she changes her personality based on the people that she's around. However, she's also compassionate and caring, and she's also, I feel like, classified as the organized nerd kind of in the story, just by like the whole like Pokemon scene as well. And she feels that Menma's fault is her fault, or Menma's death is her fault, because of the question that she asked Jintan. Yuki, he seems to be the dick in the group. He speaks his mind and he taunts others based on their weaknesses or flaws. He also is the one that has the most trauma in the group and feels that Menma's death was his fault because he could have stopped her to run off, but didn't try as hard as he could. And he also confessed his love to her before she died. So that could also kind of... He was also rejected in a sense, and as soon as he was rejected, she basically died. Sudoku, she's uppity and smart. She kind of like takes her studies very seriously, isn't usually concerned what other people think of her. Secretly in love with Yuki and always wanted to be like Anjo because of how she handled Yuki. Anjo, just her personality, she doesn't like take shit from other people, and she can kind of dish back what Yuki gives to her. And so Sudoku was always really jealous of her, and she blames herself as well for Menma's death because they all do. Popo, funny and goofy friend, the one that always has your back. He's a hard worker. He wants what's best for Menma always, and doesn't really question Jintan when he initially says she's back, and he blames himself for Menma's death because he saw her drowning. So characters I also gave a 5. I said character development in all was such a great, and there was so much character development across all of them, and I felt like they all changed in a certain sense, but it was also a really great balance with personalities. So direction and cinematography. So the direction of this whole entire series is driven by the wish that Menma has to pass on. And I said at times it felt like they were kind of reaching a little with trying to connect the wish to the initial storyline at the very beginning of the series. However, everything kind of like tied back to the childhood and that one moment that changed everything when Anjo asked Jintan, do you like Menma? I also really liked the kind of like the twist at the end for how like her wish really did come about. I won't mention it again. And I said that each character has an essential piece in the plan. It kind of has like a driving force. Like there's not one character that has kind of like more headway over the other. I think they do a really good job exploring all of the characters and how they're intertwined. So I gave this one a 4 only because I felt like they were reaching at times with the whole entire wish thing.
Okay.
And that was at the beginning. Music, I fucking love this music. Like I've already listened to, like you had this on your playlist before, so as soon as they played this, I automatically recognized it. So all of the music that they selected for this series, it prompted some type of emotion.
Yeah, so that ending song becomes kind of a... Look, there's other people I've watched videos on where they've done analysis of this series where they've kind of given what's the term, a Pavlovian effect, right? Where like it's kind of like that test where you do something to a dog.
Salivating dog,
yeah. It's like that with this song
and
because
really
you associate it in
like,
your head with sadness, because every time it's played you're like, I'm gonna cry or something, you know. So, and then that song, because they do a variation of it at the last episode, it starts playing, and immediately, because they've made you think of it, you start crying because you're just like, you've made me think of that, and this is sad. It's a genius in terms of sound design how they do it.
It's insane, but all the music that they had, I would 100,000% listen to it again, and I gave that a 5 as well.
Okay.
So, overall enjoyment, I fucking love this series. So, clearly I gave that a 5 as well.
Okay.
So, without further ado, let me go back and re-say my scores, and then I'll tell you my total.
Okay.
And then I'll have you re-say yours. So, story I gave a 5. Let me scroll down. Sorry, guys. Characters I gave a 5. Direction and cinematography I gave a 4. Music was a 5, and overall enjoyment was a 5. So the total was a 19.
19? You mean 24?
24.
Okay. So
clearly I can't do math, guys.
Story, I gave a 4. Characters, 5. Direction, cinematography, 5. Music, sound design, 5. Overall enjoyment, 5, which is a 24.
So we tied. Oh shit!
Again.
I'm surprised. It's funny because when I was scoring this one, I was like I really wanted to be hard on this series. Like I really tried to nitpick because I knew as soon as I got to like episode 3, I was like, "Fuck, he's gonna win this episode." And I'm like, at that point, I was just like, I don't fucking care because I love this series so much that I was like, I'm just gonna give him the win.
I'm actually surprised you liked it so. I mean, I knew this was gonna be something you'd probably enjoy. Because I've been trying to actually get you to watch this a couple times. Because I was like, this is such a her series. Because she loves to watch shit that makes her cry. And this shit will make you cry. If there's no... Did this
make you cry?
The ending scene made me cry. Because when you get to it, it like kind of... It hits you because they train you to think this is sad. And that ending scene is really what does it to you. Because
I was destroyed.
like... Because you're just... It's when they open the fucking cards.
Yeah.
Is when I'm just like... Oh no! Oh god!
Because you know it's coming.
Yeah, and you're opening them because I mean, when I'm not gonna spoil it, but the point is that you think that it's going to end like that, right?
Yes.
You're just like, no,
But then
don't.
that like the actual ending scene.
Yeah, and you're just like
how they tied it back to their childhood. It was like so pleasing, but at the same time so heart wrenching to like see and to hear. I was just like, I felt like somebody was like squeezing my heart. I was like,
yeah, it's pretty genius how they do it. But yeah, I'm surprised that we tied there. I think this is the highest score we've both given.
I think so.
Anything. Now we've tied once before.
Yeah, but I don't think it was this high. I think it was at like
17 or 18 or something. Yeah, this is these are both, I think, for us the highest rated things we've given. So it's a good episode. Yeah. I like that. All right.
We were evenly matched.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. I think I'm still winning, but
okay. Whatever.
Anyway,
we're not keeping track.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Because I know we enjoyed watching the shows. If you have anything you would want to recommend that you think we would like based on any previous shows episodes you've listened to for us, you can send us an email at wordlovepodcast@gmail.com.
Just don't recommend it based on 80s or 90s or Mike won't watch it.
And if you do, don't just say it's an 80s and 90s because then I definitely won't watch it. And otherwise, you can follow us for any updates that we have for the podcast. We are at Instagram and at Twitter at Warren Lovecast. Otherwise, I typically will give some updates every now and then. My Twitter is Mr. Space Lion. And with that,
see you later, guys.
Bye.